Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Sonal Sharma, and on behalf of SEWA Bharat, I welcome you all to the third edition of SEWA Samvaad 2022, in partnership with the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of India. Today, we shall talk about women micro-entrepreneurs in the informal economy, with a focus on their resilience and growth. Women-owned enterprises are largely informal or unregistered and are concentrated at the lowest rung in terms of size of enterprise. Where the definition of microenterprises includes enterprises of up to 5 crores annual turnover, 50% women-owned unincorporated enterprises have an annual turnover of less than 1 lakh, and a huge 93% have an annual turnover of under 10 lakhs only. These women micro-entrepreneurs have not been able to tap into a supportive policy and financial environment for entrepreneurship, and thus are increasingly vulnerable to external shocks with low levels of resources to cope with such disruptions or crises. And of course, the pandemic has been adequately evidence of that. While these women take decisions bearing financial risks, they don't have access to enough social or economic buffer to restart, diversify, or grow their businesses. To address their specific needs and challenges, a more tailored and integrated perspective has been adopted by many. Today, we've gathered here to add to this very pertinent discourse on the multiple approaches that have been devised to build resilient women micro-entrepreneurs, including one that SEWA has championed over the past 4 to 5 decades. Joining us today in this discussion is a distinguished group. I'd like to welcome Shri B.B. Swain, Secretary of Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of India, who is our keynote speaker for this webinar and will be joining us shortly. Ms. Susan Ferguson, UN Women's Country Director for India. Mr. Dilip Chinoy, former Secretary General, Federation of India Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. Ms. Jayashree Vyas, Managing Director of SEWA Bank. Ms. Ranana Jhabwala, Chairperson of SEWA Bharat, and Ms. Veena Reddy, Mission Director, USAID India, Minister Counselor for International Development in the US Embassy, and career member of the Senior Foreign Service. We'd like to start this webinar with a video of the stories of some very enterprising women we worked with in SEWA. Our gratitude to USAID for sponsoring this video. Can we please have it on?
मेरा नाम बासमती मुर्मू है और मैं ग्राम गुंदवार की रहने वाली हूँ। पोस्ट चुरचू, थाना चुरचू, जिला हजारीबाग, राज्य झारखंड। मैं एक गृहिणी हूँ और खेतीबाड़ी भी करती हूँ, साथ में बकरी भी रखी हूँ। उसके बाद आंगनबाड़ी सेविका भी हूँ और सेवा से आज्ञावान भी हूँ और मैं जड़ी बूटी का दवा भी बना करके बेचती हूँ।
मेरा नाम मीरा देवी है, मैं रानी घाट की हूँ, राम सेवा गौशाला, वार्ड नंबर 40 से, और मेरा काम है मछली बेचना।
મારું નામ મમતા જનક બારોટ છે। અમે કોટેશ્વરમાં રહીએ છીએ, જે અમદાવાદમાં છે। મારી અથાણાની ફેક્ટરી છે, જેમાં અમે અથાણું બનાવીએ છીએ।
इसमें 75% जंगल से ही दवा मिल जाता है और 25% ही हमको अपने से लगाना, यानी कि दुकान से खरीद के लाना पड़ता है। थोड़ा कम ही पूंजी में हम लोग उसको दुकान को शुरू किए। 2019 से हम लोग चरही मेन रोड में दवा दुकान चला रहे हैं और प्रतिदिन 5-6 पेशेंट आते हैं और उन लोग का इलाज करते हैं और इससे हम लोग का इनकम भी अच्छा आ रहा है।
मेरा घर में महिला में से अकेले सिर्फ हम ही थे, तो मेरा ससुर और मेरा हस्बैंड दोनों मछली का ही काम करते हैं, मारते हैं मछली। तो हम थोड़ा पहले मेरी सास बेचती थी, तो सास डेट करने के बाद तो मतलब दूसरे को देते थे तो कम पैसा ला के देता था, तो खुद से बेचना स्टार्ट किए।
હું એક બહુ જ નાના ઘરેથી છું। મારા ઘરમાં છોકરીઓ બહાર જઈને નોકરી કરે એ બહુ મોટી વાત હતી, તો બહુ જ કહેવાથી કદાચ એ માની ગયા અને મને જોબ કરવા દીધી। અને ઘરમાં જેટલું ટાઈમ અમે સેવ કરી શકતા હતા એ ટાઈમમાં અમે અથાણું બનાવતા હતા. થોડા ટાઈમ પછી એમ લાગ્યું કે હવે આ કામ જે અમે કરી રહ્યા છીએ અથાણું બનાવવાનું એ સારું ચાલી રહ્યું છે, બહાર લોકોને પસંદ આવે છે. હું મારું પૂરું ટાઈમ એ અથાણા બનાવવામાં આપવા લાગી અને સેલિંગ મારા હસબન્ડ કરવા લાગ્યા. પણ જેમ જેમ એમાં પ્રોસેસ કરતા ગયા ત્યારે એમ લાગ્યું કે આપણા બે હાથ એમાં નહીં ચાલે. જે બી આજુબાજુમાં પડોશી રહેતા હતા એમને કંઈ થોડું થોડું કટિંગનું કામ ચાલુ કર્યું. ઘરમાં જેટલા પણ મેમ્બર્સ આવીને મારી સાથે કામ કરી શકતા હતા એ બધાને રાખ્યું.
दीदी लोग आई तो मतलब कि बगल में मीटिंग कर रहे थे, तो उस मीटिंग में हम गए. तो जब हम इस मीटिंग को सुने समझे तो दीदी लोग बताए कि इसमें मतलब बचत भी होता है. तो हम सवाल भी किए कि बचत करने से क्या क्या फ़ायदा होता है. तो बचत के बारे में बताई. कुछ दिन के बाद फिर दीदी लोग को बुलाए. तो दीदी लोग को बुलाए तो हम पहले यहाँ खाता खुलवाएं सबको. तो बिजनेस तो जो भी टूटा फूटा करते ही रहे, मतलब उसी से कुछ कुछ रखते चले गए. और जब हाथ में मेरा पैसा आ गया तो हम इस चीज़ को और थोड़ा बढ़ा दिए.
મારી એક ફ્રેન્ડ હતી જે સેવા બેંકમાં જતી હતી કે કદાચ ત્યાંની કસ્ટમર હતી. એને મને એડવાઇસ આપ્યું હતું, મમતા થોડી થોડી સેવિંગ રાખ, તારા માટે કામ આવશે. સેવિંગ કોઈ 100 રૂપિયા 200 રૂપિયાથી એકાઉન્ટ્સ પણ ઓપન નથી થતા. શું કરી 100 રૂપિયા બચત કરીને? આગળ જઈને આમાં જ તને લોન પણ મળશે. લોન અને લેડીઝને એ સમયે એવું બોલવું પણ ઘણું અઘરું લાગતું હતું 2005માં કે લોન આપશે કોઈ બેંક, એ બી લેડીઝને ના હોય. હું કરું છું શું, ખાલી અથાણું જ તો બનાવું છું. જે ક્લાસીસ એમના ચાલતા હતા ત્યાં જઈને બેઠી, એમને સાંભળ્યું કે શું કહેવા ઈચ્છે છે. તો એમ લાગ્યું કે ના, આ બેંક એટલી સારી છે જે મહિલાઓને આગળ વધવા માટે સપોર્ટ કરે છે. જે પહેલી લોન હતી મારી 1 લાખ રૂપિયાની હતી, જેનાથી અમે એક જગ્યા પણ રાખી, એટલા બધા વર્કર્સ પણ રાખ્યા જેમને હું સેલરી પે કરી શકતી હતી. અમે 1-2 સાધન એ વખતે પરચેસ કર્યા હતા માર્કેટિંગ માટે. પછી એમ થયું કે હવે એક ગાડી 4 વ્હીલર પરચેસ કરી દઈએ જેનાથી વધારે ક્વોન્ટિટીમાં માલ ડિસ્પેચ થાય. પછી બેંકે અમને એ પણ શીખવાડ્યું કે જે પેમેન્ટ્સ કરવા માટે તમે ચેક સાઇન કરો છો, બેંકમાં લાઇનમાં ઊભા રહો છો, એના કરતાં બેટર છે કે યુપીઆઈ જે અત્યારે આજકાલ નેટ બેન્કિંગ સિસ્ટમ્સ ચાલી રહ્યા છે એનાથી કરીએ. એના હિસાબે અમે ધીમે ધીમે આઈટી રિટર્ન પણ ફાઇલ કરવાનું સ્ટાર્ટ કર્યું. ત્યારે અમારે કદાચ 5 લાખ કે 10 લાખનું ટર્નઓવર વર્ષે કરી લેતા હતા, જે ધીમે ધીમે વધતા અત્યારે અમે 1 કરોડ સુધીનું ટर्नओवर वार्षिक बताइए थे.
जब हम लोग को थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा मरीज लोग आने लगे, उन लोग के लिए दवा बनाना पड़ता है. हम तो अपना काम से व्यस्त रहते हैं, इसीलिए फिर कैसे जल्दी दवा तैयार करेंगे. तो उसके बाद फिर हम मिक्सचर मशीन का उपयोग करने लगे. पहले तो हम लोग गांव-गांव जा कर के प्रचार करना पड़ता था. अब तो फ़ोन का सुविधा है, नंबर सब दे दिए हैं, पम्पलेट छपवाए और पम्पलेट जैसे मरीज लोग आते हैं तो लोग मरीज लोग को देते जाते हैं. तो वो स्वस्थ हो जाते हैं तो वो अगला कोई को बताते हैं कि आप इस नंबर से संपर्क कीजिए. और वे फ़ोन से अभी संपर्क करते हैं तो वो लोग आते हैं. जब हम लोग पहला कमाई किए, उस पैसे को हम लोग दुकान को बढ़ाने के लिए हम लोग सोचे ताकि कल को ये हमारा दुकान थोड़ा बड़ा रूप का धारण करे.
फर्स्ट दिन जो हम काम किए तो हमको अपने आप में बहुत खुशी हुआ कि हम भी कमा सकते हैं. जो भी कमाई हुआ तो पहले तो घर का सामान लाए. तब कुछ दिन के लिए अगर हम खरीदारी बंद करेंगे तो जो कमाते हैं हम उस चीज़ को हम बचा सकते हैं.
કોવિડ જ્યારે પણ આવ્યું બેન આપણા ત્યાં, ત્યારે એવું હતું કે શાકભાજી પણ નહોતા મળતા, કે વેપારીસના તરફથી અમને એવા કોલ્સ આવવા માંડ્યા કે શું તમે આટલી અથાણા અમને આપી શકો છો, શું તમે અમને ખાંડ આપી શકો છો. જેમ અથાણાની કંપનીમાં અમારા માટે સોલ્ટ, નમક એક મોટી વાત છે. તો એ વખતે લોકોને નમક પણ નથી મળતું કારણ કે કરિયાણાની દુકાનો પણ બંધ હતી. નાની નાની બોટલ્સમાં, નાની નાની થેલીઓમાં અમે મરચું, હળદર, ખાંડ અમારેથી પોસિબલ જેટલું થયું એટલું પેક કર્યું. જ્યાં જેને જેટલી જરૂર હતી, કરિયાણાવાળાની દુકાનવાળો મંગાવે તો એને આપીએ. તો એમ થયું કે કંપની બી મારી ચાલુ રહી, મને નફો ના મળ્યો એ ચાલશે, પણ મારું માલ બગડ્યું નહીં, લોકો સુધી પહોંચ્યું, એમને ખાધું. એના પછી જ્યારે બી અમે એ જ દુકાનવાળાને ઉત્કર્ષના લેબલની સાથે માલ આપ્યું તો કસ્ટમર્સ એ જ અથાણું લેવા એના ત્યાં આવતા હતા. તો એ હિસાબે મને એમ થાય છે કે મારી પબ્લિસિટી થઈ ગઈ, એ પણ ફ્રીમાં, અને મેં એક સારું કામ કર્યું कि वक्त कोई भूखा ना रखा.
अथी बोले ना कोविड-19 का, इससे पहले मेरा हस्बैंड का तबीयत खराब हुआ था. दीदी लोग बोली कि ठीक है तो हम लोग करेंगे सेवा भारत के थ्रू, संगठन के थ्रू. तो वो लोग क्या किए, लेके गए सिरसा मेडिकल, वहाँ से फिर इलाज किए, वहाँ से रेफर कर दिए पटना। तो वहाँ से जब इलाज करके आए तो उसके बाद लॉकडाउन लग गया। लॉकडाउन लगा तो वो पिछले बार जो लॉकडाउन लगा था उसमें मछली का बिजनेस बहुत अच्छा चला। तो दूसरी बार में क्या हुआ कि मछली का बिजनेस में हम लोग को बहुत घाटा हुआ, क्योंकि मछली खरीदना कम चाहते थे आदमी लोग, भीड़ कम लगता था, इस कारण से हम लोग को बहुत दिक्कत आया। तो कोविड-19 के बारे में फिर एक कॉलिंग वाला काम आया था, वो बीमारी के बारे में, जैसे कि किसी को अगर तबीयत खराब है, मोहल्ला में रहते हैं तो पता चलता है कि फलाना आदमी को तबीयत खराब है, तो ऑनलाइन डॉक्टर से बात कराने की बात था। तो नंबर लिए दीदी से, तो ऑनलाइन वो डॉक्टर देखते भी थे, उसमें भी हमको बहुत सुधार हुआ मेरा मोहल्ला में।
दुकान हम लोग खोल नहीं सकते थे और रोड पर हम लोग चल नहीं सकते थे, गाड़ी चला नहीं सकते थे। तो हम लोग के साथ बहुत दिक्कत आई कि मरीज लोग भी फ़ोन करते थे कि हमको दवा चाहिए, तो हम उसके तक दवा कैसे जाएं। हम कहीं पैदल जा कर के तो उनको दवा पहुंचा नहीं सकते थे। उन लोग को बोले कि आप अपना सुविधा देख करके मेरे तक पहुंचिए, हम आपको दवा देंगे। पैसा सब बहुत कम आया था, लेकिन फिर भी हम लोग हिम्मत नहीं हारे और यही सोच करके हम लोग महामारी में इसी तरह हम लोग जूझे।
उनकी प्रगति लिए यही चाहते हैं कि वो आगे बढ़े, बिजनेस को भी बढ़ाए आगे, कि अगर कहीं से मदद मिले तो इस चीज़ को और बड़ा कर देना चाहते हैं। जैसे अभी 2 आदमी मिलके कर रहे हैं, उसमें अगर ज़्यादा हो जाएगा तो 5-6 मिलके भी बढ़ा सकते हैं बिजनेस। इसमें मतलब किसी का दबाव में नहीं रहते हैं, मतलब कोई तरह का दिक्कत हो जाता है तो उस दिन नहीं भी जाते हैं। सबसे अच्छा हमको यही लगता है कि अपना काम अपना आत्मनिर्भर है, कि अपने आप में है।
उद्यमी महिला वैसा है जो अपने से उत्पादन करके, अपने से बना करके जो बाजार तक ले जाती है और उससे पैसा कमाती है, अपना रोजी रोटी करती है, अपना परिवार चलाती है। जिस तरह से हॉस्पिटल में या ये में पेशेंट लोग लगे हुए रहते हैं प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल में, कि लाइन बन लाइन मरीज लगे हुए रहते हैं, तो वो वैसा ही मेरा दुकान में भी लोग आए और दवा का विश्वास करके ले जाएं और वो दवा खा करके स्वस्थ रहे। हम यही चाहते हैं कि वो लोग अपना जिंदगी, अपना स्वास्थ्य पर ध्यान दे।
બેન કોઈ પણ બી કામ નાનું નથી, તો જે પણ માણસ જે પણ સપનું જુએ છે અને જે વિચાર્યું છે કે હું આ કરી શકીશ, બસ એને સમય આપો, એની પાછળ લાગી જાઓ અને મહેનત કરો।
I hope you all enjoyed the video. I believe it was quite telling of the sheer diversity of the micro-entrepreneurs that exist in India's informal economy in terms of the origin, nature, and size of their businesses. The one thing that runs common to them all is their contribution to the community and how they are the drivers of local economy. And I'm sure we'll touch more upon it in the next couple of hours. All right. So first up, I would like to introduce Ms. Susan Ferguson and request her to share an international perspective on resilience during and beyond COVID. Ms. Susan Ferguson has been appointed as UN Women Representative for India. She joined UN Women in 2017 after a long career in international development. She has lived and worked in South Africa, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea, where she has lived for 12 years. Susan has experience working in grassroots development agencies, establishing and managing social services, working within local, state, and federal government in Australia on social policy and social programs. Her diverse career is spanned by the themes of gender equality and social justice. Susan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sonal, and good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you discussing this incredibly important topic today. And I'd really like to thank SEWA for inviting me. And also I'd really like to convey my regards to all the esteemed panelists and everyone who is here today. So as we all know, and as that video so well showed, that COVID-19 has really had a huge impact on the economy, particularly on the entrepreneurship sector and women micro enterprises. The combination of illness, unpaid care work, lack of access to financing, and also domestic violence has left many women facing enormous barriers in returning to work and in keeping their businesses going during COVID as well. Increased care burdens and household responsibilities due to lockdowns has put many women under pressure from their families actually to scale down their businesses or even shut their businesses, with families often thinking that women's work are, hobbies or supplementary to family income rather than serious and legitimate businesses. Many women have had to stop working to devote themselves solely to unpaid work and care work around the house during COVID. And this has really exacerbated some of the statistics that we know already around women's care burden. So Niti Aayog estimates that in India, women do 9.8 times as much unpaid care and domestic work as men, which is huge, against the global average of 2.8 times. Of course, that varies from country to country. Women's lesser access to capital, markets and technology is deeply linked with access to childcare, healthcare and insurance, as well as to safe public and private spaces. Women's entrepreneurship and self-employment in India is often synonymous with informal employment, which offers little to no social protection, as we saw also in the video. So when crises happen, women's income and security is immediately jeopardized. The challenge of earning an income and raising a child is made more difficult by the lack of this social security. Without access to quality childcare services, women have little time to participate in the labour market. In addition to high monetary costs for childcare, which is a barrier for many, women often lack accessible childcare located close to their workplaces, with opening times that can accommodate long and irregular working hours. And in addition, often the models of childcare are not familiar to many women who need childcare. Similarly, women micro-enterprises in the informal sector are excluded from employer-provided healthcare or insurance, leaving them without a safety net. An illness, accident, or even maternity can push these women deep into poverty. The prevalence of violence and lack of safety in private and public spaces, like transportation, is a risk they face more than male micro-entrepreneurs. This violence against women, of course, is a human rights abuse, and it has a terrible individual cost on women's lives and the lives of their children. But it also has an economic cost for themselves, their families, and their countries, in fact, macro economies. The pandemic has further exposed the vulnerabilities women face. There's a fly buzzing around me here. For example, information and access to COVID-19 prevention and healthcare have largely moved online. Many women are not computer literate or don't have access to online information or markets for that matter. UN Women recognises the centrality of women's rights to access childcare, healthcare and insurance for their economic empowerment. Our work on building women's livelihoods has shown us that women cannot take full advantage of employment and self-employment opportunities if they don't have minimal access to social security. In addition to this, women micro-entrepreneurs face unique challenges. Being small in size, they have lower than average finance requirements, and therefore their transaction costs are often higher, with formal financial institutions perceiving them as poor investments. Government schemes that are widely offered, including the Mudra scheme, the Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program, and the Credit Guarantee Scheme for micro and small enterprises, are particularly essential and relevant for women. It's heartening that government buyers are mandated to buy a minimum of 25% of annual purchases from micro and small enterprises, of which 3% should be from women's micro and small enterprises. And this is really an excellent initiative of the government. In light of the pandemic, a survey by UN Women to assess the impact of COVID-19 on women micro, small and medium enterprises in India found that almost 2/3 reported working at lower productivity or just managing to stay afloat. At the same time, entrepreneurs increasingly are having to shift to e-commerce and social commerce platforms to sell their products and services. And this actually has been a huge innovation and a lifesaver for many small and medium and larger businesses. Research shows that digital illiteracy and unfamiliarity with these kinds of platforms, though, deterred women microenterprises from moving to the online marketplace. The pandemic has truly disrupted business as usual. How do we create a resilient ecosystem that builds on the progress we've made so far? And how can we make the most of new innovations within markets and economies to ensure women benefit, and more than benefit, that they thrive and are able to use these new tools and marketplaces to really expand and grow their businesses and make them resilient and sustainable? It will be crucial that we ensure women micro-entrepreneurs are equipped with new skills that allow them to be nimble and adept in this volatile and fast-changing environment. Providing low-cost and accessible basic healthcare, insurance, flexible childcare services, and safe working environments is the need of the hour. So too, of course, is financial literacy, access to online markets, and knowledge of the digital economy. Access to technology will be crucial for women micro-entrepreneurs, not only to enter marketplaces, but also to access healthcare, for example, such as registering online for your vaccination. You know, these online environments are an enabler for so many aspects of our lives nowadays. Broader financial literacy programs are needed, focusing on entrepreneur development and training, and campaigns to promote awareness of existing schemes for women micro-entrepreneurs will also be important. Our research that I mentioned before also showed that some of the excellent programs that are around often weren't known by women entrepreneurs. So a large part of our programs, UN Women has been really working actively with the government and its organisations to help these women access the programs and to find pathways to employment and viable small businesses. Together with SEWA Bharat, we've been implementing the cash transfer program in Delhi, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. SEWA Bharat, under this program, is providing livelihood support to thousands of women through conditional and unconditional cash transfers for addressing economic vulnerability and reducing food insecurity. So again, these are social protection mechanisms. In addition, 100,000 women self-help groups are being trained on sexual and gender-based violence through community messaging. And this, we hope, also will help women sustain their businesses and know where to access help if they do experience violence. To date, almost 5,000 unconditional cash transfers and many others have been made, and more than 3,500 SEWA Bharat members have been linked to social security schemes. I mean, in India, this is it's great work, but we also know it's a drop in the bucket of the need. And I think together there are so many partners, government, donor funding, and others who are providing an enormous amount of support and social protection. So our field visit with 25 SEWA Bharat women members in Bhopal showed that the assistance has really helped them tide over immediate difficulties, such as buying food and paying for child's education. And in fact, sadly, also some of the cash transfers had to be used to pay off other loans that women got through loan sharks at high interest that would have kept them unable to be able to build back after the pandemic. So we all have a role to play in ensuring that women micro-entrepreneurs don't get left behind. And now more than ever, we really have to push for resilience, diversity, access to existing schemes, and equality. Unlocking women's economic potential will improve the lives of countless women and their families. And unlocking women's economic potential is transformative for economies the world over, including India. So with these words, I will hand back to Sanal, and thank you once again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. And thank you especially for giving a full picture of the myriad challenges that women micro-entrepreneurs in the country face, and for pointing out how undeniable is the unaffordability and inaccessibility of childcare and other services. You mentioned women do 9.8 times the care work as men, as opposed to 2 times the global average, and that is quite alarming. And we are very proud at SEWA Bharat of a partnership with UNWomen, especially for taking forward the cash transfer component. Thanks, Susan. Next up, I would like to welcome and introduce Mr. Dilip Chinoy, who was till recently Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. Prior to FICCI, Mr. Chinoy was the founding managing director and CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation, NSDC, which is a public-private partnership to catalyze the skill development and livelihood creation sector in India. He's worked for over 40 years in the development sector. Mr. Chinoy, may I request you to share your thoughts on the role that the private sector can play in promoting women micro-entrepreneurs and perhaps some insights from your time at FICCI. Mr. Chinoy.
Thank you, Sonal. And, I think for Susan, it's a very good afternoon because I just overheard that you're based in Australia. To Renana Ben, Jeshri Ben, and Veena Reddy, a very good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Caveat that, what I'm going to say doesn't necessarily reflect the views of FICCI because I'm now former Secretary General there. But as Sonal requested, I thought, and as Ninana Ben requested me when she chatted to share some ideas and thoughts of what could be done. It's really a pleasure to be amongst this distinguished panel. All of you, whether it's USAID, UNWomen, or SEWA, are doing phenomenal work on the ground with women entrepreneurs. FICCI has a very interesting partnership with USAID and the Millennium Alliance, where we are looking at supporting social entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are women, but that's a separate chapter there. First of all, thank you, Susan, for your great opening remarks, which makes life very simple for me because many of the issues you have actually laid out. I would also like to compliment SEWA and the team for the great video, which they actually showed. I would like to just extend and draw on two key studies which I was really looking at there, and of course, one, Susan, you mentioned about the Niti Aayog study, and the second one is the one done in 2019 by Azim Premji University on micro entrepreneurship with game there, and also draw upon some of the work that we did in NSDC to actually talk of how to create the ecosystem. But first, if I could just go back and step back, I think a lot of people, while they talk about the importance of the medium and micro and small scale industry in India, how much it contributes to the manufacturing or the services sector, how much it contributes to employment, how much it contributes to growth, actually forget that really 95% of those statistics actually come from micro entrepreneurs. And out of that 95% of the 100%, only 20% or so are women micro entrepreneurs. So the first thing that came to my mind and how the private sector could actually help is how could you actually foster the growth of women-led micro entrepreneurship ecosystems there. And there are various ways we could actually do it, and I'll come to that in a few minutes. The second thing which actually struck me was that a majority of these organizations, as you mentioned, as the video mentioned, are in the unorganized sector or the informal sector, but many of them are single person, owned enterprises. Now, the challenge with being a single person enterprise is if you have to take care of someone who's sick, as Susan mentioned, or you yourself fall sick, then there's a huge challenge. And no matter how resilient you are, the time that you're sick or the time that you're looking after other people doesn't come back, and you have to really restart and grow your business again. So, a logical kind of step is how do you help people scale from single person enterprises to 2, 5, multiple people enterprises, or how do you get single, person enterprises to collaborate to form you mentioned about the self-help groups in your opening statement. How do you actually do that and create a backup system so that, at least the businesses continue to run, or, other things happen if there is a kind of unfortunate incidents in the single person enterprise. The third point, which I actually, struck me, was that if you look at productivity levels, right? Productivity levels naturally in single person enterprises are, a fraction of the benchmark of 5% enterprises. That's what both the Niti Aayog study or the Ministry of Medium and Small Enterprise, MSME, micro and medium small enterprises, or the Azim Premji University actually suggested that, the productivity levels are low. But then what interesting finding was there in the Azim Premji study was that in some parts of the country, even with single unit enterprises or double enterprises, productivity levels were high. Now, given UN Women, given USAID, and given SEWA, if we can actually capture those, what is working well in those areas, and then take them to the other areas and, share these experiences there and say that, similar enterprises in other parts of the country have created this ecosystem and have created and productivity levels are high, and therefore you actually go in and look at it. So that's a very important thing which actually struck me coming forward. The next point I'd like to mention, this is something for the country as a whole to consider. If we look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem in India, and we look at the developing and developed world, actually the share of employment that it is being done in India is just about double digit. Whereas in most developing countries and developed world, it is around 20 to 30%. So what that means is that even given the large number that we have, there is sufficient headroom to actually double or triple the employment in this sector if we get different parts of the ecosystem correct. And given that the private sector is a significant player in this area, what are the things and how can we actually get the private sector to look at help in creating the ecosystem in this space? Of course, when I was listening to Susan when she was actually talking, or in the Azim Premji study, they talk about the constraints that are there. And, most of the constraints, they came out very beautifully in the video as well. And, how we need to actually understand. So what is it that we could do going forward? I mean, the problems are well known. I remember when I was in NSDC, I was talking to SEWA and SEWA Bank, right? And how do you look at skill development sector in India? There's so many skill development programs here, but they're all focused at employment. They're not focused on entrepreneurship and not focused at creating an ecosystem that promotes entrepreneurship. The evidence that you have to put in to show that a person is actually employed or is self-employed post the skilling for the training organization to get the money from government is really onerous. We need to actually simplify that, right? So I think that is and you have state development, skill development systems. You have a whole lot of different national programs going on, whether it's in the Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Urban Development, or the Ministry of Skill Development, etc. But I think we need to actually enable this and focus this at building, entrepreneurship and enabling that to happen. The pandemic has actually resulted in something unintentional, and which is actually going to benefit this ecosystem, which is forcing digitization. And I like the part in the video which showed that you could actually use the UPI, and you need not go to the bank, although you showed the person signing a check, etc., etc. And you also mentioned, if I recall, Susan, about the need for promoting digital literacy. I think digital finance literacy and accounting should be made a part of the adult education program and should be focused at women in a very, very specific way to enable them to actually happen. When I was chatting earlier with Rirana Ban, she mentioned that many women entrepreneurs tend to confuse their personal accounts with their business accounts, right? And, I'm sure Jayashree Ben will be facing that challenge in the bank, typically. So I think this whole program needs to actually be done. And what we can do, the challenge here is how do we start and where do we start, right? In the cluster studies, right, they have actually shown that there are around 6,000 to 8,000 clusters of MSMEs around the artisans clusters around the country, and about 600 to 400 clusters of other clusters there. So if in each state, we take 4 or 5 or 6 clusters and start small, and do pilots there with the different private sector. And you mentioned a lot about how the government is doing procurement from women, about the GEM portal, etc. But then how do you get the private sector play into that? FICCI as an organization said that we will purchase 2% from women entrepreneurs, and actually it is part of the diversity program there that we are running. So if we take these clusters in different states and create programs which connects end-to-end banking to market, right? And you mentioned I think about the loan sharks, right? The challenge here is that many of these entrepreneurs, they don't take monthly or annual loans. They take daily loans. For them, they need money in the morning, they get money in the evening, and they're willing to repay. And if you can create a system enables, and if then it, if you take, let's say 100 rupees, and say there's annual interest of 6% or 10%, even 10%, or take 20%, whatever you want to take, that's 20 rupees over 365 days, right? Which makes it a fraction of a paisa per day. Now, if you can use the digital ecosystem and the digital banking system and the outreach that organizations like SEWA have to actually make money available at a fraction of a paisa per day, then you change the entire system. And here again, the private sector, the fintech companies that are there, how do we actually make them happen, and make them actually enable that to go forward. So that was the second thought that I actually had. The third, and I'm associated with LaborNet, which is the original fundee of NSDC and Gayatri Vasudevan, etc. And during the pandemic, one of the things that they actually came about is how do we ensure continuation of business and resilience. And we focused on 2 areas, logistics and supply chain. In fact, 2 of the women in the video talked about the challenges. One, talked about, supply of salt, right? Okay, now imagine if we could find a local e-commerce company, in many urban areas, we find that you have salt can be delivered actually in 10 minutes. That's actually an ad on television. I don't know if you've actually seen that. So if we create this kind of system, and then they created a hackathon, and they invited startups to actually present to them ideas, right, of how they can help create livelihood at the grassroots thing, and also a bit focus on the women. They actually did not focus on the women, but it was a general focus. And I think if we can replicate this in those areas where we look at the cluster development programs there, etc., it'll be great. Another learning that I had, which is very interesting, is, and this can supplement what the adult education programs. Madhura Microfinance very nicely has produced actually an MBA 101 in a digital and video format, right? Where anybody who can learn that can actually understand the fundamentals of business and what needs to be done. It's in a video format, and it's very well available to other people. And how can we actually scale this up and make it available across different geographies in India going forward? The advent of the smartphone, right, has been a great event. And this, Jeshuben, I would like to leave this idea with you. Many women entrepreneurs don't have access to a smartphone. And if you have access to a smartphone, you can actually dramatically change that. And both Susan and Veena would actually understand that in the US and many other countries, you actually get your phone free if you subscribe to this thing. So how can we actually initiate the penetration of smartphones? It could be, for example, a company, like Apple or Samsung, take any company or Jio or anybody on that, to look at how can we create the availability of smartphones and teaching women entrepreneurs how to use it and really do the connectivity, etc. There going forward. There is a need. And again, I would leave this with SEWA and the SEWA Bank, as well as USAID could consider this. There is a need for actually getting a voice-operated accounting system for micro entrepreneurs. It's a very crazy idea, right? One of the biggest challenges is that many of them, right? We tend to take it for granted, especially in the videos that we saw, that most of them are educated. They can type in, they can do stuff. It's not necessarily there. There are a lot of people who are not so well educated, but they're voice. And with voice to text and voice, this will be a great thing if you get it going forward. And this is going to be a part of the future. You can actually create a hackathon around it going forward, etc. The government programs are, and you outlined a lot of them, Susan, in your address. But I think now what worked as a kind of helping people to become resilient, right, during the pandemic needs to be scaled up and needs to be actually institutionalized. And I'll give you one example. And I was actually it was an eye-opener. And I must say that, this was a discussion between Ninana Ben and me when we were actually talking. This 10,000 rupee loan to street vendors, right, which was a part of the Atmanirbhar package, which was there. 10,000 needs to be scaled up, right? Because, maybe make it 25, 30, 40. In fact, some people have, a normal vegetable vendor may have 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees of vegetables in the shop, etc., etc. So how can we scale this up and look at it and expand the coverage from street vendors to all types of micro entrepreneurs? That could be something which we can actually look at it going forward. And my last 2 points, I know I'm coming to the end of my time, is that, a lot of the government schemes have done tremendous thing to free up women's time, whether it's the Swachh Bharat, Nal Se Jal, the Jwala, the Bharat Net, the Jam Trinity. But you also mentioned we need, can we look at the whole healthcare ecosystem in the village to create creches, to, even that's a business opportunity, right? Can the healthcare sector skill council or someone actually under NSDC create people to run creches, etc., going forward? And linked to that is that there are many schemes of government which are looking at, again, the water scheme, the Gram Sadak Yojana, the Sagar Mala, the Ayushman Bharat, the telemedicine program, the adult education program, the accident insurance program. There is a card which NSCC has started where if it's a credit card for your education, it had accident insurance cover, it had health cover, and had other benefits as well. And how do we actually ensure that there's a micro entrepreneurship focus in each one of these schemes? The problem is that they're all operating in silos, and how do we actually create horizontal to connect them going forward? The last point I would like to say here is that if you look at many of the sectors in which women are not there, it is because the capital cost of entry is very high. Now, what we could do there, and let me actually say that, this is one particular thing. I think there are a lot of good women who could be, for example, masons or carpenters. There are very few women in the furniture industry or the toy industry in India. One reason is the culture in India is for the artisan to own their tools. Whereas in Europe and in the West, you can rent the tools. So at the grassroots level, if you can actually create this cultural shift and enable renting of tools on a daily basis, right? Again, it could be linked to the bank, it could be linked to organizations like SEWA. Then this barrier to entry goes and enables a lot of people to enter into this. I think many organizations, including SEWA, are working at the grassroots level. And as this discussion links UN Women, USAID, and SEWA together, I think, and SEWA Bank, sorry, Jashri, when it's all the organizations, I think we need to look at creating such linkages at the ground level. I believe if we all work together, we can reach and exceed international levels of micro-entrepreneurship contribution to employment. Again, once again, thank you for having me here. And I look forward to hearing all of you in your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chinoy. You raised a very important question. I mean, several important questions, actually. How do we help scale a single person run enterprise to one which is run by multiple people, or collaborate with others as a way to, like you said, bolster the resilience of the enterprise in case of a crisis or multiple crises? And also for noting the paradox that while productivity of a single person enterprise is a fraction of multi-person enterprise, in some parts of the country, single unit enterprises have actually quite a lot of productivity. You also touched upon the importance of documenting successes and the relevance of sharing experiences, and the role of SEWA Bharat, USAID, UN Women, and other similar organizations, and the huge potential for employment generation through micro-entrepreneurs, which can be run by the private sector by running, like you mentioned, much needed end-to-end cluster development pilots, for instance. A lot of questions and comments directed at you, Mr. Chinoy, in the Q&A. Please feel free to address them during the webinar. All right, so next up, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Jayashree Vyas. Jayashree Ben, a professionally qualified chartered accountant, has been working as the managing director of Shri Mahila Seva Sehakari Bank in Ahmedabad since 1986, which has more than 600,000 women clients. During her tenure, she's taken active steps to introduce an integrated microinsurance scheme for women working in the informal sector. She's also devised and implemented various housing finance schemes and saving groups for poor women. In the year 2001, a financial literacy program was introduced by SEWA Bank, the first of its kind, at the initiative of Jayashree Ben. May I request Jayashree Ben to share her insights on SEWA Bank's model of financial inclusion for women entrepreneurs. Over to you, Jayashree Ben.
Thank you very much. And, thank you to everybody who had, talked earlier, and I have learned so much from this. This is what I have seen, that and so many kind of ideas which Chinoy Bhai has also given. So we will definitely think about this. My topic is model of financial inclusion for women and micro entrepreneurs. And I was just thinking that we started. The SEWA was started when even the concept of financial inclusion was, and nobody knew it. I think maybe it was the promoters of SEWA. They might have thought about this because of they realized that there is a need for financial inclusion. So anyway, you all know, but I will say that self-employed women organizations was started as a union in 1972, and all these women at self-employed women. So all these women were self-employed, and what we were seeing was that they were economically active, they were brave, they were hardworking. We also saw that they were risk takers, and they also were managing crisis, because many times there were crises were coming in, and they also had some inherent kind of skills which we saw maybe from their mothers or grandmothers. But this was something which was very, when we saw it, it is that they are so brave and they are so smart, and they were doing all the economical activity. But there was one constraint, with them was that, as I said, there was no financial inclusion concept there. So they did not have access to formal financial or kind of financial institutions, and they needed, as they were all entrepreneurs, they needed working capital and of course, money for buying tools, but they did not have that. So they had to go to money lenders or from outsider, but they had to borrow at a very, very high interest rates. And anyway, their businesses were very small, their economic activities were very small, and in that, giving this kind of interest was actually not possible for them, but they were doing it. So eventually what was happening was that they were getting into, in spite of working so hard, they were they were going into the vicious cycle of poverty. And it was the time when all these women decided, of course with the help of SEWA, that can we have our own bank? I will not go much into details of what the history of this, but yes, they decided that we want to start our own bank. That's also kind of very bravery, I would say. And the second thing was that they said that we will contribute our own capital. It was only small amounts, but still, they created their own, and the bank was started. So when bank was started, the main objective of bank was, the first of all was that, how can we help them to come out of the clutches of money lenders? The second thing was that, of course, our main objective was how can we strengthen their whatever livelihood economic activities they were doing. Of course, building their own capital, building their own assets, and also, and we were seeing that they were risk takers, but there were many risks there. So how can they protect their own risks, and eventually how can they grow their businesses, and they grow their basically grow their businesses. So this is how we started this bank. So the first thing which we started was definitely, the first thing was the first credit amount which we were giving. Of course, it was very small amount. Sometimes it was 200 rupees or 500 rupees. But the credit was also given for giving this, if they have borrowed from money lenders, so we would give them a loan so that they can give it to the money lender, so that at least that they can save their interest. So that was the first thing. Second thing was also that many of them had their own asset, but they had pledged or mortgaged there, and which was basically assets which would definitely help them to grow their business. So we also gave them loan and help them to get back whatever assets they had pledged. But and so this was something which was which we started doing. But at the same time, we were also seeing that these women had definitely instinct to save. They were saving in at home and everything everywhere. But we thought, we started helping them to collect their savings from door to door, and they started saving their money. And now today, of course, many of the women have lakhs of rupees in their account as a saving account, so building their own capital. So this is something which we were seeing. The first thing which we saw, there are three types of women basically. They are traders, they are home-based workers, and they are service providers. So we wanted to see that what kind of credit or what kind of financial services they would need, and then we were starting helping them to do the same way. I'll just give you one example. There's not much of time, so I will give them only one example. So one example is of a food processing person who was making golgappas. So it's very everybody loves this. So she was she was in a slum during near there's a riverfront, and it was a mud house. I would say mud hut, and she was making this, and she was doing this on job work. So they did not, because they didn't have enough money. So it was a job work she was doing. But what was happening was that, because it was a mud house, that whatever she was making, it was becoming soggy. And she herself came to us and she said that, can you give us 2,000 rupees loan so that I can have a tiles on my floor, so that that it will not become soggy. So this was the only thing which we did it. But Eventually what we saw was that, and that was because majority of our members are also home-based workers. So what we saw was that they needed first, because the small houses and the houses were so bad, so that, they needed all kind of services. They needed electricity, they needed water connections, they needed sanitation. So all these things, small things, we started giving to them. And it was not basically, it is of course that their home had become better, but the main objective was that they could do better business. And I'll just give the same example of this woman. Then she, first of all, when she had money, she started doing her work on her own rather than having a job work. The second thing which happened was that then she also involved others, because she was making more money, more volume of business. So eventually, of course, she also helped her family members, but even then, it was bigger. So then she started employing more and more people with her, and now she is having a wholesale. I mean, she has wholesale business here, and so this is one example. I can do many other examples, but so this is what we're seeing, that whatever they wanted. Similarly, as you were talking about carpenters, we had carpenters also here, and all those carpenters, of course, they were also doing manual work, and the business was doing, but they were doing business, but it was a very small business because they were doing everything manually. And they only came to us and they said, can you give us a loan for having a tool, buying a tool. But then we went to their home and we saw that, of course, they wanted some kind of a machine, but they did not. So it was the wood cutting machine, but we saw that she did not have connection, electric connections with her. So then the first thing we said that, okay, first loan for having electric connections, and the second would be that then they would definitely have more productivity. So this is what we realized, that there were three criteria we then realized that we should have. One was that whenever they had any kind of technology, and particularly machines, the first thing was that their productivity was increasing. The second thing was that their income was increasing. But the third was very important, that their treasury, whatever treasury they were, it was reducing. So this is then, this is how we were making our own criterias, that learning from them. So I can go on and on and on, but I will not go on this subject. The other thing which we saw was that in spite of working very hard and doing all this, there were so much need for protecting risk. And this was, I think, we started in the 1974, but in 1980 or 86, I think. In 86, we decided that we should also link them with their insurance. And of course, it was very difficult because the insurance companies were saying that these women are not, insurable, as bankers were saying they are not bankable. So of course we could do that, but still what we are seeing is that, this was the personal insurance, but when it is coming to business insurance, what happened was that as their businesses were growing, it was started with 10,000 rupees, but now many of them have 5 lakh. Or this woman who was making pickles, she has taken 15 lakhs rupees of loan. So then they were also the first thing was that also the government or the banks were also saying that there should be insurance for these women. That was the first thing. But the second thing was, they also wanted to have insurance. But when we go to insurance company, they are still saying that no, it's because they have milk or vegetables, all kind of perishable goods. So they are saying no, perishable goods we will not insure. The second thing was that there was potters who had her business was of 10 lakh rupees, and then we said that we need insurance, and they said that no, you can't take any insurance because this is fragile. But we saw that this woman was really putting her all kind of pots and everything in such a way that not a single pot was broken. But still, I mean, they said that no, this is. So what happens then? Now this comes to the bank. That when RBI would say that when there is this kind of a loan, bigger loan, there has to be an insurance. So on one hand, we want insurance, but insurers are not giving to us. So this kind of complaints are already always are there. But the other thing which we also saw that one is this, of course, insurance, but the product, the financial product. Normally what happened, and we also did the same thing, and all other microfinance companies are also doing the same thing. We are giving only term loan. So it is kind of course, for buying any kind of tool, you can have term loan. So it is for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, and every month they would pay their installments. But when they started bigger loans, then they needed working capital also. So, and working capital cannot be only for term loan. So then when we started this product also, it was very difficult because it was you have this kind of, like, if her working capital need is 5 lakhs, then we would give her 5 lakh rupees. But it is so whenever she will have to withdraw, she will withdraw. So you all know it is cash credit loan. So cash credit loan we started, and now women have understood it, and now they love it. But this is something, every time when you have to decide different kind of a product, any financial product or any credit product, we always have to learn. We have to teach to women, and we also have to teach to regulators also sometimes that, this is how we can do it. So this is always a challenge, but we always like this kind of challenge. Now I'm talking about, what I feel is that only giving credit or only giving financial services would not help. Some kind of hand-holding support definitely is required, but then we also have started, all kind of different type of business development programs. And as first, as Renana Ben was saying, and you also said, was that the first thing was that, yes, they were mixing their own household income or finances and business finance. So the first thing we wanted to do was, to explain to them, and so we did it, and so that is working. I'm not saying that all of them are doing the same, but at least they have understood that this is very important. But the second thing, which was
Jayashree Ben,
yes.
Very sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to give you a quick time check. We have just about 1 minute, and I also see that Mr. Shri B.B. Swain has joined us. Back to you, Jayashree Ben, if you could.
Okay, so I will just talk about this digital. So we have our fintech trainings also, and we have been giving this kind of trainings, and women are very clever, and they immediately, even if they are illiterate, they understand it quickly, and they also start working on it. This is what we have seen. And so yeah, okay, sorry, but so basically all different types of business development services which we have been giving to them, that making a big business plan, and then of course some kind of concept, that value addition concept, and different types of concepts. So this is what we have seen. But what we are saying is that it's the second generation, third generation, and they have become more and more entrepreneurs, bigger entrepreneurs. Those who were doing only sewing or ready-made garments, now that their daughter have become kind of fashion designer. So okay, sorry for this, but thank you.
No, thank you so much, Jayashree Ben. Sorry if we hurried you towards the end. I'll come back to, I have some comments on what you shared, but can I request Renana Ben to welcome Shri B.B. Swain now?
So good afternoon, everybody, and I especially wanted to welcome Mr. Swain, and thank you so much for joining us. I should also say that this is a joint effort, this webinar of SEWA Bharat, and we have the logo support of the MSME ministry, because the MSME ministry is so interested in promoting women's entrepreneurship. And I think from our talks with Mr. Swain, he's particularly interested in the micro entrepreneurs, because of course that's where the majority are. So Mr. Swain, welcome.
Thank you.
And I think the next presentation is mine. So I'll make that, and then we'll request you to give your keynote address.
Please.
Can somebody, I have a PowerPoint. Yeah, sorry, Sonal.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'll quickly, but thank you so much, Jayashree. Ben, you mentioned something very important, that creating specific services for targeting specific micro entrepreneurs is very important, and therefore needs assessment is equally important. I'd like to introduce Renana Ben now. Renana Ben is the chairperson of SEWA Bharat, and she's best known for her association with the Self-Employed Women's Association movement for nearly 45 years. She's also one of the founding members of international and regional networks like Vigo and HomeNet South Asia, which are focused on improving conditions for workers in the informal economy. She serves on the United Nations High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment. And over the years, she's won many awards for her contribution to the sector, including the Padma Shri Award by the Government of India. Over to you, Renana Ben.
Thank you. I thought I would make both a general presentation on women micro-entrepreneurs in the informal economy, who they are, where they are, and what do they need, and tell us about some efforts of SEWA. So can we go to the next, please? Next slide. So who is a micro-entrepreneur? Next slide, please. We have the definition of the MSME, where 5 crore annual turnover is the limit. So of course, everything under that. However, the 73rd round of the NSS has separated women-owned enterprises and men-owned enterprises. And it says that 20% of all enterprises are women-owned enterprises, but 97% of them hire 3 workers or less. And actually the majority are either family or single person, and 78% are home-based. So that's very high. At this point, I just want to say something very quickly, which is that although 20% are women-owned, a lot of the family enterprises, which are listed as men-owned, actually have women partners or women working in them. So the women are part of the entrepreneurial system, but it's listed as a men-owned. And so therefore, these women are often invisibilized, unrecognized, and don't have necessary support systems. And SEWA is seeking to nurture these women entrepreneurs with tailored interventions. Next, please. Next. This is just a brief thing that women micro-entrepreneurs are everywhere. Animal husbandry, clothes, vegetables, street vending, paper rolling, all kinds of job work, farmers, e-rickshaw drivers, even we have some, and so on. Beauty parlor, of course, is a major one. Okay, here we have, as we said, the MSME says that 5 crores is the limit, but all the enterprises of the unincorporated enterprises, the turnover between 50 lakhs and 5 crores is less than 4%. So less than 4% of enterprises are between 50 lakhs and 5 crores. And I think if you go to 5 crores, it'll become 0.00 something. And if you look at the other end of this, then the unincorporated women-owned enterprises from the NSS have an annual turnover of less than 5 lakhs. Next, please. Now, I must just again point out that there is a lack of research. Just go back, please. There's a lack of research. And the last figures we have are of 15-16. After that, there's been inflation, there's been demonetization, there's been COVID. So Whether 5 lakhs is still 5 lakhs, we don't know. Next. I'd like to spend a few minutes on this particular chart. If you look at the x-axis, it is the size in terms of annual turnover of the enterprises. And if you look at the y-axis, it is the percentage of enterprises within that turnover. Let's start at the bottom, that is the less than 1 lakh, the very small enterprises less than 1 lakh. The red line you see is the women-owned enterprises. And there you see 52% are under 1 lakh. 52% are under 1 lakh, very small. Whereas for men, only 12%. And the blue line is the line of men-owned enterprises. So only 12%. We go to the 5 lakh level. At the 5 lakh level, almost 85% of women-owned enterprises are under 5 lakhs. And of the 3 people in the 3 women in the video, 2 of them, as you can see, were in this section. Both were rural, of course. Whereas for men, it's much less. Only 49% are under 5 lakhs. And then when you go to 10 lakhs, we see 93% of women enterprises are under 10 lakhs. So very small, and that's who we want to reach. Now, the area under this red graph, under this red line, which of course extends all the way to 0, would be the women with whom we are working and the women on whom we are focusing now. And of course, as I said, 93% of all enterprises, women's enterprises. What happens to these women? They are small and therefore they easily decline and fail. And what we need to do is to build the resilience to prevent this decline into smaller and smaller and finally falling off the enterprise section altogether into either labor or even destitution. So building the resilience to prevent movement towards decline. And on the other hand, we need to put in inputs to support growth. And as Dilip Chinay said, we really need to, and as Susan also said, we need to build the ecosystem to support this growth so that they become bigger and more resilient and are able to contribute more to the economy. Next, please. And does women entrepreneurship matter at all? Next, please. And here are some reasons why it matters, but there's more than this. We know that women's labor force participation is declining. However, women enterprises employ 77% of women. So women's enterprises employ more women. And whatever are the earnings, they tend to invest in the family, children's education, building up family assets, and also they support other family members with their entrepreneurial ventures. Women tend to employ local workers and local resources, resulting in a nurturing of the local economy. On a business level, women entrepreneurs outperform their male counterparts with greater profit margins, 31 as compared to 19%, and the NPS are also lower than men's. Next, please. What has SEWA been doing? First, let me just say a few words about SEWA, though of course we have already talked about it. SEWA was formed in 1972 by Bharat as a trade union, but we soon realized that you needed to also do developmental activities. And we started forming cooperatives, of which the first was the SEWA Cooperative Bank. In the organization which I'm representing right now is SEWA Bharat, which was of course established many years ago as a national federation of SEWA organizations whose main effort is to take the lessons that we learned in Gujarat under Bharat to many other states of the country. Next, please. And so today, We are in 18 states, and every year we take dues from women. And last year we had 2 million, more than actually 2 million women members. And if you count that we employ the whole family or are part of the whole family, then it would reach 10 million. We also have an integrated approach, which includes organizing health, especially social security, livelihoods, government linkages, skill development, and research, and especially advocacy for the ecosystem. Next, please. Now we go into the reasons of why decline and how do we do growth. Why do enterprises fail? And especially, why do women's enterprises decline and fail? Health is a major reason. Approximately 82% of households withdraw their savings and their enterprise incomes to pay for hospitalization expenses. And usually if somebody in the house is ill, it's the woman who looks after them and therefore are not able to pay attention to the enterprise. Water and sanitation, especially in both urban and rural areas, women spend an average of 55 minutes per day, and in urban areas, an average of 800 rupees per month for water and to access community toilets. Unpaid work, especially childcare. The figure I have here is more than 5 hours. Women work more than 5 hours on unpaid care, a lot of which is childcare. And finally, what we saw in this last 2 years is the pandemic has affected everybody. And from our studies, we found that within 5 months, they'd lost 78% of their savings. And within the 2 years, they had spent all their capital, which would have supported their enterprises. Next, please. What can we do? Healthcare. That is extremely important. Health insurance, linkages to the health system, private and public, and of course, primary healthcare and health education. Childcare, creches are extremely important. We do not in this country really focus on creches. SEWA runs its own creches, but for women of this level, this is a very, they're not able to fully pay for a creche. The Anganwadis are very helpful, but they should be of much longer hours. Then water and sanitation, infrastructure provision really helps women give more time to the enterprise. And finally, in pandemics or other big disasters, we really need to support them, food, cash transfers, and help them get their working capital so that they can start their enterprises again. And these are things that SEWA has been doing. And this is how you make the women and their enterprises resilient. Next, please. And the pathways to growth. Next, please. And I'm going to go through this quite fast because we've talked about this. Digital and financial literacy. There is a digital gap between men and women. There's a digital gap, urban, rural. And there's a digital gap between the informal sector people and the more better off people. We really need to spend time to bridge that digital gap. And so, as Jeshben was telling, digital literacy has become a very important part of our programs and should be of all programs, so that these women can tap into finance and markets. Secondly, financial planning, as we have been hearing, of how to separate your accounts from household and business accounts. Next, please. Access to credit. We have some figures. I'll just leave them with you. 17% of women micro-entrepreneurs are only 17% are aware of financial schemes. 80% rely only on personal resources. So as SEWA Bank is the prime example we have of linking women to credit. And there are many reasons why women are not linked to credit. And we do believe that there needs to be a special fund which will provide credit to women micro entrepreneurs. I don't want to go into detail now, but there are many reasons why banks are not giving it, especially because of collateral issues. And so we need to think beyond collateral for women micro entrepreneurs. Next, please. Next. And this is
just a quick time check. I'm done.
Right. And finally, the collective entrepreneurship. So we have been talking about that. We find that the most effective way to form joint companies, self-help groups, cooperatives, and so far we have formed 156 such enterprises, and some are small with about 100 women, some are very large with about 3 lakh women. Next, please. And finally, access to markets. We need to get them onto the digital markets. GEM is a prime example, but there's also WhatsApp for Business, India Mart, and we've started a number of our own digital marketplaces. Next, please. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Runanaben.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much for that very informative and insightful presentation. Couple of things stood out. One thing is that it has come out very strongly that the majority of micro entrepreneurs, I think 93% actually belong to the lower segment of the micro enterprise category. And secondly, the fact that we need to work on both resilience and growth simultaneously, as it is this kind of holistic ecosystem that we need to create to allow micro entrepreneurs to thrive. I do want to quickly thank all the attendees at this point who've joined this webinar. I think it's a great turnout, and I see some very interesting comments and questions in the Q&A, and I hope that you all stay till the end. All right, so next up, we have Shri B.B. Swain, the Secretary of Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of India. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1988 in the Gujarat cadre. Presently, he's holding the charge of Secretary in the Ministry of MSME. In his 33 years of experience, Shri Swain has served in the Gujarat state as well as the central government in New Delhi. He's a master's degree in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and a master's in public policy and management from the Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands. I must say he's extremely well-read and is sensitive to the issues of women entrepreneurs. Mr. Swain, I request you to share some thoughts on mainstreaming women micro-entrepreneur and perhaps share some stories of success from the government perspective. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see Mrs. Jawala, whom last I had seen actually was in '89, when as probationers we had visited Gujarat and we were attached to SEWA. And ma'am had taken us to see the workers working in tobacco fields in Kheda, I perfectly remember. She was also extremely gracious in inviting all of us, all probationers at that point of time, to her house for a wonderful dinner. I still have fond memories of that. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It's really great meeting you after so many years, and I look forward to meet you in person.
Yes.
I also spot my old friend, Mr. Dilip Chinoy, right there in front of me. A very great friend for many, many years now. Thank you so much. Quite obviously many are online here, but I can see Mrs. Bina Reddy and Mrs. Susan Ferguson. So thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I have been given a task. I'm not really prepared for it, and unfortunately, I have just about 5-6 minutes. So I'll give a small rendering. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation, madam. I would love to, if you can kindly share with me also. It had a lot of data which we could use, and very, very useful data. So good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I must say the theme of the webinar, Women Entrepreneurs in the Informal Economy, Resilience and Growth, is most appropriate. An entrepreneur is the one who takes risks, successfully overcomes uncertainties, and uses the other factors of production. I believe all women have the inherent quality of becoming entrepreneurs, is their adapted multitasking, and indefatigably become masters of all trades which they are involved in. The pandemic has affected a large number of economic activities and changed the lives of people all over the world. It's the micro entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs who obviously were adversely affected. And as we know, there is no really one size fits all solution to either deal with the consequences of the pandemic or to be an entrepreneur. And during the pandemic, Government of India changed the definition of the MSMEs. This was changed amidst the pandemic in June 2020. The composite criteria of investment and turnover ensures that deserving enterprises are brought into the fold of MSMEs without any apprehension of them graduating out. This is where I probably would request the Udyam, I mean, you are aware of the Udyam portal which was started last year. It's a portal which actually doesn't involve any kind of a paperwork. All it needs is numbers. And let us say people who have below 40 lakh kind of a turnover, it doesn't even insist on a GST number or anything. This is something which I personally think, you are talking about unorganized, but I think all entrepreneurs now should start registering. It's a question of if you register, then technically speaking, even, you know, last year, RBI has come out with this particular direction that if you are not really registering, then you are not falling within the credit of the priority sector lending. These things I think are very, very important. We have a huge number of entrepreneurs who are actually not registered, and as a result, probably we miss out. In some ways or the other, these things are important. I'm very happy to report that a significant number of entrepreneurs have started registering. Today, we have about 71 lakh who have registered in the last, let us say 15, 16 months. And this is growing. Every day we get registration from entrepreneurs. As you know, that 94% happen to be micro entrepreneurs. So it is not that they're not registering. Out of 71 lakhs, 94% as on date are micro entrepreneurs. But I think registration is very, very important when you are talking about access to credit, when you're talking about guarantees to be accessed, and number of host of other factors where these things are increasingly becoming more and more important. One of the target of this particular ministry is definitely formalization. Ultimately, only if we formalize certain sectors of the economy or this kind of entrepreneurship, a lot of benefits can start flowing to them. Out of 71 lakhs MSME who have registered till date, because this is a real-time data, every day we take the statistics, about 20% are women entrepreneurs. There are more number of women entrepreneurs than small and medium entrepreneurs. If you really look at this particular data, the small in India is around 5%. The medium entrepreneurs is less than 1%. So the number of women entrepreneurs in this country is far more than even small entrepreneurs and medium entrepreneurs combined. Undoubtedly, it's the micro entrepreneurs which require the most handholding. The number of women entrepreneurs who have registered in the services sector today are 1.5 times of the number who are registered in manufacturing. This is also data which is coming out every month. Out of all our registrations, we do come out with a lot of very, very important data which helps in the policy guidelines. This is in line with the growing contribution of the services sector in our GDP. Further, the past couple of years have underscored more than ever before the importance of the services sector and the need to move towards an online system. This is what Mrs. Jawala talked about. I think this is increasingly important. The ministry is continuously working on how do you really improve digital literacy, quite obviously in very, very focused manner. The digital capacities of the micro entrepreneurs definitely needs a lot of handholding, which we are working on. And we're very happy to note that SEWA has started working on all those lines. These are some things where we clearly come together in the viewpoint which we are having. Also important in this context is the public procurement policy, which our ministry runs for micro and small enterprises. This order was amended in 2018 to bring in a mandatory provision of 3% procurement from women entrepreneurs by all ministries and Department of Central Public Sector undertakings to be made from women entrepreneurs. In the past few years, although the targeted 3% has not been reached, that we must admit, but due to concrete steps, there are positive signs. One is that absolute terms, women MSCs, the procurement from women MSC is increasing, the percentage is increasing, and the number of women beneficiaries having benefited from public procurement is clearly rising. This is it's a continuous effort, and let's hope that we reach that 3% in quick time. In the last 3 years, more than 4 lakh women have benefited from various schemes of the ministry. I would like to particularly mention about PMEGP, which focuses in general on micro entrepreneurs and particularly on women entrepreneurs. Besides, there are programs like entrepreneurship and skill development programs, procurement and marketing support schemes, Mahila Kair Yojana, honey missions, cluster development programs, number of other programs. Other ministries and departments to have various initiatives from which women entrepreneurs can benefit. The significance of MSMEs for the Indian economy is evident from their contribution in terms of various parameters, particularly GDP, employment, and exports. In the current times, the question of enabling MSMEs to further carve out a niche for themselves in the exacting next step. In a globally integrated world, the role of MSMEs in the supply chain cannot be undermined. It is essential to make the MSME ecosystem, particularly for women entrepreneurs, more conducive. I'll end here, and I'll always be very, very happy to partner with SEWA. It's an organization which actually I have known from my beginning in the service. I mean, right from kind of the very first year when we are kind of part of our training was with SEWA. And being from Gujarat cadre, quite obviously over a period, I have known people and I've known the exceptional activities which they have been involved in. And thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. And looking forward to meeting you in person. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
A most sincere gratitude,
Thank you.
Mr. Swain, for taking out the time and joining us today for delivering this keynote address. And thanks again to the Ministry of MSME for collaborating with SEWA Bharat for the webinar. You mentioned registration is important.
Registration, yeah, please go ahead. Sorry for disturbing. Please go ahead.
No, please you go on.
No, please go ahead. Please.
Okay. So, I mean, it's important to note that registration is very important for all enterprises to receive the support, otherwise they may miss out. And you've mentioned that significant number of enterprises have actually registered and the numbers are growing. More than 4 lakh women have benefited from the schemes from the ministry in the last year. And many of them have been micro-entrepreneurs. And that is a very important takeaway from your note.
So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I do also want to add that Mr. Swain mentioned the need to move towards an online system. And I think listening to the conversation over the past 1.5 hours, we do see this need to collectively work from the likes of organizations like, for instance, SEWA Bank to reach that stage. I'd like to now introduce our final speaker, Ms. Veena Reddy. Ms. Reddy, a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, arrived in New Delhi in August 2021 to take charge as the new Mission Director for USAID in India. In her role as the Mission Director, Ms. Reddy will lead USAID's operations in India and Bhutan. Ms. Reddy brings with her a rich background in development and diplomacy. Born in Andhra Pradesh, India, she's the first Indian American to lead USAID in India and Bhutan. Ms. Reddy most recently served as USAID's Mission Director in Cambodia, where she oversaw robust programs spanning food security, environment, health, education, child protection, democracy, and governance. And she previously worked as USAID's Deputy Mission Director in Haiti. She's also had a fabulous career in law, and she holds an MA and BA from the University of Chicago, and a Doctor of Jurisprudence from Columbia University of Law. Ms. Reddy, may I request you to share the work USAID is doing on building resilience of the micro-entrepreneurs we've talked about, and equally important, their linkages to health. Over to you.
Terrific, thank you. Thank you, Sonal Ben, and thank you to all the speakers before me. It is amazing to share a platform with such passionate advocates for equitable policies and practices. So on behalf of USAID, I'm delighted to be here and to discuss how we can bolster support for women micro-entrepreneurs and foster a conducive ecosystem for women to thrive. In India, women contribute 17% to the country's GDP, which is significantly lower than the global average of 37%. Yet, as we heard from several speakers, including Ms. Jabwala and Mr. Chenoy, that women, that single entrepreneurs have very high productivity. And so we're missing something, right? That they're only contributing 17%, but so many are single entrepreneurs who have a large capacity for productivity. And I guess we also heard that 93% of women are actually working in an informal and unorganized market, so they're cut off from traditional resources and regulatory benefits, and as well as prone to exploitation, which only was exacerbated during the pandemic. So, Oxfam has estimated that women losing their job, decreased India's gross domestic product by 8%. So this isn't just a women problem, or frankly, an India problem, when a significant portion of one of the world's largest economies is missing, neglected, or lagging. That affects us all. And so is a reason beyond empowerment of women, it's empowerment of all of us and will lead to all of us improving, because we all suffer when women don't have access to healthcare, education, or financial resources that enable them to participate fully in productive economic activity, which now is is increasingly globally connected. But I know that the group here knows what's at stake. But the question, I guess, is how do we promote an environment or an ecosystem that enables women who represent such a large part of the Indian workforce to achieve their potential and support not only their families, but also their communities and collectively the growth of their country. So several speakers have mentioned some of these issues before, but I'll just touch upon there's one, I think some of the social norms related to women working outside the home need to be addressed. A few months ago, I was lucky enough to meet one of the SEWA Bharat entrepreneurs, and she said she had an incredibly supportive husband who initially was quite skeptical, and then was converted into a champion, and even bought her a new dress to participate in a big professional event. So we really need to, I think, normalize women's empowerment. And it's obvious that many men are ready for that. So, I hope these kinds of changes lead to changes in attitudes that also will reduce gender-based violence. Another issue that's been raised by others that I want to reiterate is the need for financial and digital literacy, as Ms. Ferguson brought up. I think one of the other speakers brought up the need for smartphones. So I think education is key for any kind of empowerment, and entrepreneurs understanding how to manage the financial aspects of their businesses and how to operate in a modern economy is essential. Another thing that I'll also reiterate from other speakers is that having access to quality and affordable healthcare and childcare is essential. As Ms. Ferguson had mentioned, what's often seen as women's work can hinder women, succeeding in productive income-generating activities. So the burden of the family disproportionately falls on women. And frankly, I can say that I've seen that at all socioeconomic levels. For example, in the US, while men seem to have recouped jobs lost during the pandemic, there are nearly 1 women fewer American women in the labor force now compared to February 2020. So again, we're missing the productivity and growth that comes with having a fully allowing for full participation. And so allowing women the flexibility to devote their time and expertise to economic activity, to have that choice and empowerment is essentially, and it is a global issue. To health, we've seen that access to contraception and healthcare allows for greater formal participation in the job market. Education allows women, you will see delays in marriage and a more ability to participate productively, and also to improve their own health by not having early, pregnancies that are too early. Or to allow women to space out and control, their reproductive lives. I think Ms. Renana Ben mentioned that women, that there's a lot of use of savings for health purposes. So we need to keep that into account too, as if any talk about a resilient ecosystem, that having health care and childcare be essential elements of that. I think access to government services is another important aspect. I think Mr. Swain mentioned the registration. Oftentimes women, especially if you're not in the formal economy, won't know how to exercise their rights to services like healthcare or financial programs such as COVID-19 relief. Of course, direct access to capital, finance, and markets is another element of a healthy ecosystem, and appreciated Ms. Vyas's comments on SEWA Bank and the efforts to form a more inclusive, less predatory environment for women. And this is so important for them not to only to enable starting businesses, but to sustain them. So at USAID, when we recognize the devastating impact of the pandemic on the economy, we did look at how do we sponsor, how do we help those that are most vulnerable? And of course, women are part of that solution. And we really want to have them be part of the solution, participate in the workforce, and thrive. We're very proud to have supported the video that we saw on building resilient women entrepreneurs. And we've seen that work making a difference. Just under 15 months, the program has reached nearly 200,000 women in 10 states, increasing their access to loans and training on financial digital literacy, helping them contribute more fully to the economy. And I particularly love seeing the impact that has beyond one woman. And we saw, for example, Mamta was able to grow her business and employing others in the community. And I met a woman named Julie who told her story of being able to successfully run a beauty parlor under this program using health safety protocols amid the pandemic. So this not only gave her family needed income, but it also allowed for a social outlet for members of her community, a very much needed component for mental health and resiliency. And I am excited to see that the government's new budget also includes a focus on mental health, which is extremely important. So I want to allow time for the question and answers. I'll just say, I'm really excited to hear from everyone and how they're approaching resiliency as a multifaceted, holistic issue that to look at welfare across the board. And we're really excited at USAID to be helping women entrepreneurs, working with SEWA Bharat. We've also engaged and started a new program called the Revive Alliance, which is also on track to provide services to more than 200,000 marginalized women and youth within 3 years. And in terms of resiliency, I also, we talked about access to markets a bit, and that's another USAID program I'd like to mention called the Power Initiative, where it is helping women who derive their income from forest services how to produce non-timber forest products and then connect them to markets with IKEA, for example, which is now selling their products. And so I think those kinds of introductions and awareness raising and connections is also another way to promote resiliency. And I'm really encouraged by everything we heard today from all the great work everyone's doing. Also the Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program, which is helping women in rural and urban areas through microenterprises. And thank you to everybody who is here today, and especially to SEWA Bharat for hosting this important event. And so, I think this pandemic represents an opportunity to create more resiliency to shocks for the future. So, if we can build back better, let's go for it, I say. And thank you very much. I also look forward to March 8th, coming up around the corner for International Women's Day. So what a great way to start thinking about some of these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Veena, for reflecting on your experience with some of the women micro-entrepreneurs you met. And we're very privileged to have partnered with USAID in advancing this work and building resilience of women micro-entrepreneurs. You also highlighted that we have to listen to the women to frame any interventions for them, and that's very important. You also touched upon the importance of addressing mental health. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all our esteemed speakers today for giving some incredible insights through your work on building resilience and nurturing growth of micro-entrepreneurs. While you're presenting, we received a whole lot of questions, actually. So we'll start the Q&A now. I see we have some time, so we can take 2-3 questions. So first, there was a question directed at Mr. Chinoy. It says, on the digital front, one of the challenges is low mobile phone ownership, and forget about smartphone, even feature phones. So low mobile phone ownership among women, which is not due to poor economic condition of household, but more due to the gender inequality or gender inequity. Any reflection on that?
Thank you, Sonal. I think this goes to Ms. Veena Reddy's point about cultural challenges. Many state governments actually were looking at giving free mobile phones to girls, but parents and men folk, and I realize that I'm the odd man out in this panel now with Mrs. Swain gone, tend to discourage the use of mobile or the availability of mobile with women. So, one of the thing is that we need to do a lot of cultural work and change cultures at the ground level. Without doing that, in many states, in India, we will not be able to increase penetration there. It's a challenge, but I think every challenge is an opportunity, and I would like to look at the opportunity side of it rather than the challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Chinoy, for that. I have another question, which I think Susan then could reflect on. It says, how do you upskill at scale when micro-entrepreneurs have to be the jack of all trades? And what's the best way forward based on international experience?
I saw that question and I thought I wouldn't write back to it because you could write pages, I think.
True.
So I think there's a few things there. Is the complexity of training, so that you're covering a whole range of different skills. And actually, I think that Veena talked about this sort of multifaceted approach is essential for micro enterprises and their viability. So there are a number of programs who do this kind of multifaceted training. But I think that the questioner is right that the issue is how do you take them to scale? And here, I think in a country like India with a population of 1.4 billion people, it has to be the government who takes these things to scale. SEWA is huge, but still small compared to the rest of, the population of India. And it's certainly the same with UN Women. So I think our job is to trial and pilot different kinds of things and assess what works, what doesn't work, and then work with partners, bilateral governments and multilateral banks and the government to be able to take some of these trainings to scale. And so it would be great to work with the partners around this forum, actually, to do just that, I think.
Thank you, Susan, for your response. Next up, we have a question for SEWA. So I suppose Rananaben and Jayshree could respond to this. It says, SEWA is a unique example which has initiated many organizations to build the ecosystem. What can other small organizations across the world learn from SEWA who don't have the capacity to build and support organizations?
Jayshree, do you want to take it?
I think the first thing is, the approach that, SEWA has taken. SEWA didn't have much to, when we started, SEWA didn't have any resources, didn't have any, people, but it was the I would say, kind of, they wanted to do this, and that's how they brought other people, and that's how it was done. It is more kind of so often people feel that if there are good resources, then they can do it. But sometimes it is the and within us, if we feel that and then we always have seen that many other people also join when we are doing good work. So that could be one. The other could be, it's a combination of different types of people who have joined in it. Say, for example, of course, all our women members are there, but there are people who are from finance, those who are from social background, and other, like Renana Ben is from other areas. So that kind of it's kind of joining lots of people with different kind of their talents and skills, and that also helps. I don't know, you can say something.
Renana, you would like to add something?
Maybe just one more point, which is that,
Okay.
two more points. One is that, as Jeshwin said, the focus or the center of all the work is the women in the informal economy. And if you build on their enthusiasm and their needs, then things grow quite fast, even without resources. And second thing is that many small organizations have come to SEWA from different parts of the world and have taken some lessons, different lessons for each, and actually have built their own organizations. So it's very possible.
All right. Thank you, Renana Ben, Jayashree Ben. Next up is a question. I think, Veena, you could perhaps respond to this. It says, how can we partner with tech players to identify avenues where tech innovations, for instance, fintech linkages, can help us overcome key sectoral challenges? And I know that USAID is working with a lot of partners who are pioneers in this sector. Any thoughts on that, Veena?
Sure, yeah, thank you. I will see if we can link something to some of our programs. But I would say, yeah, we have many alliances, and many of the chambers of commerce in India also have great programs where they reach out to businesses and also offer services and include new innovations. I'm also really excited that under our Samvaad program, which is a blended finance model for healthcare innovation. We have partnered recently with Niti Aayog's Atal Innovation Mission, and there's actually a call right now for proposals out for healthcare innovation. So if anybody knows of some new innovation that would benefit from support, please, please, I'll put the link into the chat. So I think private enterprise is the single most powerful force for lifting lives, and India has an incredible array of resources to accelerate sustainable development. So we continue to expand our coalition of partners, and I hope we'll come up with more innovative ways, but we need your ideas, and that's why we're doing things like partnering with others. Thanks. I'll put a few links in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Veena Ben. I think we have time for one last quick question before we conclude the webinar. I think I'll ask Jayashree Ben. Jayashree Ben, lots of questions on SEWA Bank's approach in the chat. One such question says, is there a need to come up with norms or insurance products to ensure businesses that have not been conveniently covered by the insurance sector and are in the mainstay of the Women in Focus, and how we might go about doing such an exercise from your experience?
Well, so far as insurance need is concerned, I think as usual, SEWA has been doing is that, you have to go after them. And this is what we will have to do it, that, and eventually, somebody will definitely help us, because we have always seen that, there are good people who want to do it. So we will go to the insurance companies also. This is one thing. And the other thing is, Yes, and then we have to keep on working on it, and it's a long time that then you get results.
Thank you, Jayashree. I think we do have more questions, and we'll try and see if we can send them to the speakers here and get some responses too. But I think I'd like to say a very warm thank you to all the speakers for taking out the time to be here with us today. The past 2 hours have been very enriching and informative, I must say, and a testimony to the incredible range of experiences that we have on this panel today. Thank you to the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises and Mr. Swain for co-hosting the webinar. Special thanks to Ms. Mercy Apau, Joint Secretary of the Ministry of MSME, for her immense support towards this webinar. I would also like to thank USAID for their support in producing the video we saw earlier. Like I said, we're very proud of our relationship, our partnership with USAID in supporting women workers. To all those who attended this webinar, thank you very much for your participation, and I hope that you leave with some answers and perhaps some new questions. A big thank you to the SEWA Bharat team and everyone who worked really hard to make this webinar successful. We hope that this conversation will contribute in sparking a collective discussion around women micro-entrepreneurs. Have a great day, everyone. Very glad we finished well within time. Have a good day.
Thanks to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.